This free video is brought to you by the Team Topologies Academy. Our goal is to help organizations become more effective and more humane. If you find this video helpful, we would love for you to check out and recommend our Academy content. A lot of our students ask us for more examples, more cases of how enabling teams are being applied. And I found the work of Warren through an article he published about FinOps enabling teams and other topologies. So thank you, Warren. It's really nice to have you here. Maybe we could start with just a brief description of what you do and your background, just for the people to get to know you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for inviting me, first of all. Really, really appreciate you inviting me to talk about this. Warren Walker, I'm CTO at Rock. We're a cloud and IT managed service and consulting partner. We do a lot with AWS, Microsoft Cloud. We do a lot of app dev and product development. Prior to that, I'm quite new in that role. Prior to that, I was at a global cloud consulting firm called CloudReach. My role was I was head of cloud advisory, and I was actually an advisor as well. So we'd go and help customers try and kind of augment their people, process, and technology to capitalize or exploit the value of cloud. So we'd go in and try to untangle the mess and try to help them see the business value.
And just to make sure we're sort of on the same page about this idea of FinOps, maybe if you could just share what you understand by FinOps, and then how has been your experience applying, particularly the idea of enabling teams within the FinOps context. That would be great.
Yeah, so it's part of my role, really. You kind of see the same problems moving to cloud and getting the most from cloud. Across all the different teams. Whether software development teams, whether it be cloud engineering, finance, understanding the costs and the business value. The operating model, traditional operating model needs to adapt. I think that's the key part to it. And the operating model to capitalize and exploit cloud has to change quite a lot. And one of the real core capabilities that underpin a cloud operating model is FinOps, really, one of many. With FinOps, it is, in essence, it's an evolving cloud financial management discipline. But more often, it's worth calling out the fact that it is a cultural practice, and it's about aligning, cloud cost with business value. So, if you think about back in the days of data centers, seems like such a long time ago. Still about now, to be fair. But where you had traditional budgeting, annual budgeting, traditional projects and procurement cycles, everything was governed by a project and a budget, and you'd have a fixed timeline to deliver. Whereas cloud has really accelerated the ability for product teams and platform teams to be able to accelerate value. But with that comes a lot of responsibility and complexity that needs to be managed.
Maybe, Warren, could you share, because this is also a question we get often. So if you would imagine, the life of this enabling team, or probably you did this in multiple companies, but like what typically is that inception phase of where you get buy-in to actually have people to spend time helping the teams on this? Could you share a little bit on that?
Yeah, so this is a big subject.
Yeah, I know.
It's all about starting with collaboration, right? So, obviously, big organizations typically very siloed, and there's a lot of change going on in that space to help teams become more agile and more collaborative across an organization. So there are common constructs, things like communities of practice, or CCOEs, Cloud Center of Excellence, that aim to build bridges across an organization to help kickstart, shared understanding, thinking, new ideas, and start to try and align different parts of the business to a common goal. And so everything really starts with a conversation. I think sometimes there's the old way of thinking was really more around driving common, or standards, to a point where it almost became like an ivory tower. But actually, the shift now with cloud is more about enabling teams to be more federated. Being more federated and allowing them to make their own decisions allows them to think quicker, adapt quicker, adapt quicker, try something new and scale that or fail it quicker. And that kind of autonomy is really a key tenet of digital business today. To be honest, I think disruption is only accelerating, and AI is obviously compounding that.
And you wrote an article which I found super interesting, where you had some examples of how you can have enabling teams for FinOps. I was wondering if you could share some examples of what kind of work do these enabling teams in FinOps do, and also, I guess, related to that, how do they show the value of that enabling team, right? Because typically if they're not the platform team, they're not actually building something usually, or not, that's not their main responsibility. So I don't know if you have some examples in your experience.
Yeah, so I mean, there's two elements to this, right? So I think we had this conversation previously from the article. Actually, it was in some instances you could maybe see the FinOps team being a platform team, but there is a danger. There are a lot of tools that do FinOps, right? There's more FinOps tools than brands of gin, right? They're just everywhere, and the danger is the FinOps team just becomes a platform, tries to pretend it's a platform team that's just underpinned by a third-party tool. So for me, the enabling piece to that is really the important piece, the driving the cultural change around the mindset for cloud cost financial management. And it starts with the basics. It's about being able to get situational awareness across the enterprise. So where do they start? Well, you still need some tools, right? So you're operating cloud native. You might start to use some of the cloud native tools within AWS and Azure. Maybe you start to track budgets. You start to look at cost anomaly detection. But obviously those things for some teams, if they're just fixed into, there's enough things going on in the development lifecycle that some things, you can't be an expert at everything. So being able to support the team requires you to get situational awareness of what the team is doing and how they're delivering in cloud. So the basics start around tooling. So just getting some awareness of what people are doing without having to collaborate with everyone across the organization. Because as you say, within team topologies, the cost of collaboration is high. So we need to make those decisions wisely, not just for the FinOps team, but also for all of the teams out in the wild. So we use some of the tools to be able to get some of that data. Then really a core capability within cloud, and cloud being cloud mature, is having a robust tagging strategy. So without having, if you don't have a decent tagging strategy, it's near impossible to be able to drill down into where the problems lie. So who owns the infrastructure, who's driving the cost, who's the owner for the platform or that team. It becomes impossible. So you then need to build into that piece to be able to give yourself the awareness. And if the tags contain all of the data around the business unit, the cost center, the type of environments they're provisioning, whether they're test and development, whether they're QA, whether they're production, it then starts to surface insight around aligning the cost problems and then creates almost like a virtual heat map of where to engage across the organization. So, you then aligning the big ticket items to the cost of that collaboration. And then effectively, once you start to engage, then you can start to drive the conversation around, did you know, potentially that you could optimize. We've noticed that, during particular times you're spending more, or your test environments are costing, similar amount to production deployments. Did you know there's a common design pattern that the cloud platform engineering are using that could actually reduce the cost of you running this in production? So it all starts with that situational awareness piece, and then
In
that
a way,
comes after.
it sounds to me almost like it helps you make better trade-offs, right? Like the example of the test environments, if they're costing almost same as production, maybe we have a good reason for that. Maybe because this is such a complex service, we cannot afford to test in a simplified and minimized environment. Or maybe it's just because we just took a simple route to mimic everything in the production, so that's why it's costly. So is that also part of how the enabling team helps to the let's say what we would call streamline teams or product teams make better decisions, better trade-offs?
Exactly that, yeah. So you could have your cloud platform engineering team who are obviously developing automations, blueprints, reusable artifacts that can be used by the development teams. But then there's the collaboration between those teams in the FinOps team just to kind of drive that conversation. It's almost like the last frontier of kind of optimization and cloud cost versus business value is really the app modernization piece. We want to be using more serverless platform as a service, and some of those cases can be very hard to move forward because potentially there's quite a large budget associated to some of that modernization. But actually, then when you start to bring those different teams together, maybe you have an architecture team, the business unit, the cloud platform engineering team. Some of those drivers are then driven strategically to try and move the dial. So then the FinOps team are then really driving those complex use cases. It's things like database modernization, moving from traditional siloed databases to more of a fragmented data architecture, like data lakehouse type approach, and having various teams own their data rather than having a big monolith data platform.
It's basically you provide like visibility, right, on what actually is happening, and allowing those numbers to drive the design and decision making, right, by involving the different people.
Exactly.
I have one question there, Warren, which is if you think about the enabling team, say these people that know about FinOps and are helping, were they existing in, say, in a long-lived format? So because I can imagine this is not an overnight, right? Everyone will get
No.
it, and so you probably had a group. Did you have a group of people that would be on this enabling team for quite a while? Is it correct?
Yeah, it's a huge journey. The bigger the organization,
Yeah.
the more complex the problem, the longer the time it takes to see progress. But I think I put in the article, but the whole data-driven thing has been done to death. But without data being able to inform, situational awareness about where to engage, we don't want to bury teams in questions and governance. We want them to be self-service. We need to surface the data and make it easy for them to be able to create flow and give them the data and the insight to be able to make those decisions themselves. The team. Sorry, I didn't answer your question there, Eduardo, but team composition. It definitely cross-functional in nature. FinOps analyst, architect, engineer. And really a persona that aligns to each of the technology teams within the business.
Cool.
From my point of view, I think FinOps is an interesting example where I would expect, obviously depending on the maturity of the organization and the teams, but it's somewhere where I expect to see quite clearly this pattern we explain in team topologies of like the enabling team kind of orbiting around the streamlined teams, in the sense of, you might start with the basics. Hey, do you actually know how much it costs to run your service, or to how much do your test environments cost, and things like that. And then over time, maybe you give then some time for those teams to kind of work on that and get better insights and more data around, what exactly are we spending for this service. So also thinking from a cognitive load perspective, you increase the load on that team, as you were saying, like teams are overloaded. Okay, we need to have better understanding and having some figures about costs, but then you let the team kind of process that, and then later come back and be like, okay, now maybe we can have a bit more fine-grained view on which databases you're using, or kind of messaging services or what have you. Sort of, is that something you've seen essentially over time, the help that the enabling team, the FinOps enabling team can provide, becomes more in depth, if you like, or more, you start with the basics and then you start to see more kind of, okay, now we can do more, we can have better control of the financial side of the cloud usage as well?
Yes, so that in the the FinOps maturity model, the higher you get, the more you tend to move to, they've got this concept of unit economics, so then tying business value to cloud cost. I always like the example of like if you think about the Black Friday sale scenario, and your traditional budgeting, if you think of it that way, all of a sudden you get to Friday and you see this huge peak of demand and it's out of norm for what you had in your budget. Not everyone's going to be screaming and shouting, well, where we spent all our money. But actually what should happen is it should be, well, we align all of the KPIs in the business. So if there's revenue generation and profit generation, and cloud has just delivered an exponential rise in that, it should just be a data point that's automatically pulled out and surfaced to the C-suite. So, again, that's where that FinOps, that FinOps advisory type approach within the organization, that enablement piece, helps them move in that direction. It's moving to a true, helping teams move to a true product operating model, really thinking about the business value that their platforms provide or products provide.
Go ahead, Edward.
No, I just saw that someone asked a question, which I think could be also interesting to ask Warren, which is around the sort of how typically these initiatives start. So if you imagine, right, how an organization how would this typically start? What's the case that is being made to make a FinOps enabling team be hired or be put together?
Yeah, so where it works well, where it has to work, and say where it works well, it has to work. The FinOps team should be a centrally coordinated team. It's a central function, really, that supports everything top down. It can't work at the bottom. It needs top down support to enact. You've got your budgets, your CFO costs that need to be surfaced. Alignment to the CTO and the strategy around how we're building out platforms in our technology teams and technology architects to support the business. And so it has to come top down. That doesn't mean that it's an ivory tower. Far from it. It means that really it comes back to that enabling function, the collaboration, the communication strategy is ultra important. I think the whole point of you need to shout about your wins, and pick a team, start small. First of all, get the basic tooling, basic data capabilities, which you can get from the cloud quite easily, and then really start working with the team. That's it. Start small, grow it, shout about the wins, and then really it comes back to aligning to the cloud platform engineering team, whoever's building that automation piece. And then from there, then you can build economies of scale.
Just the point of the why, right? So I think the motivation that by doing this, you get this overview on bringing the cost into your right. That probably is a story that's not very difficult to motivate to an executive team.
I would say FinOps has an unfair advantage here,
exactly.
Your CFO is never going to say, no, I don't want to have better.
I think this is an easy sell.
Control of costs and better insights on costs. Of course, that's always something they will want, and it's just it makes sense, and it's something that it keeps evolving, right? It's not something that you're done after we've FinOps all the things and we're done. It's a lot of a constant evolution.
Yeah, exactly that. I think there's a danger. It's funny, isn't it? It was just it's like the cost optimization, cost savings, quite a dangerous KPI to use, really, because the FinOps team needs to really change the way an organization thinks. That's really, really hard. And actually, you spend an awful lot of time in a FinOps team just setting up the basics. So, you've got to go out and choose tools. You've got to look at some maybe data integration platform. If you're multi-cloud, you've got to take all that data and then you've got to, simplify it to make it meaningful. You've got to implement a tagging strategy, and you've got to mature that across an organization that might not have it. You need to standardize that across maybe multiple clouds. Then you need to look at, commitment-based discounts, right sizing, anomaly detection, and all of that really is most of that is before you even start to see returns. There's multiple KPIs for a FinOps team. Some of them are, I believe, to be more cultural change elements, data insight, and really if they're driving that cultural change throughout the organization, cost optimization will come as a proxy of that effort.
And I think the best cases I've seen of actually putting FinOps in place in a way is where we actually are able to leverage that to identify what is the cost benefit of different services, right? Thinking obviously from a team topology / value stream approach, like can we get to a point where we're able to have a more fine-grained view on here's a service or a stream, which provides this value to our customers. Maybe we can translate that to a financial value, and this is how much it costs, because we have, the cloud costs are kind of, we have visibility on that, plus the costs of the teams involved. But you, again, can make better decisions in terms of should we invest more in this, or you might identify misalignments where some teams have, it's a high investment for a lower return compared to other teams. And you can also then start to identify possibly outliers where you say, this team is doing really well with a low cost and they have a high return. What are they doing differently that other teams can benefit?
Exactly that, yeah. And it makes it much easier to have a product-led conversation around budgets if you can show your cost points, you're optimizing your bottom line costs, and then being able to map that to the business value. Because cloud is danger that we see a lot of I guess just traditional IT moving to cloud. Cloud is seen as a cost center because it's tied to IT. And that's the wrong way to look at it. It is a business enablement platform that will do lots of great things. So it's really important that we align, what the business is trying to achieve and those measurements, and tie that into the cloud platform. So all of those KPIs should be built in. And again, we've discussed, right, we should have that, and that needs to be built into that insight needs to be automated. Again, it's about reducing the cognitive load on the team. That data must be surfaced out of the platform building those dashboards, that insight. So then it's great for, again, the C-suite to have those conversations. Funding becomes easier. And I think the product team, mantra around, not everything's gonna be successful, right? We know, that some things are going to fail. It's important that we embrace that. But where we do see successes, we align them to the right measures wherever possible. We surface that up to show that we are trying to move the dial.